Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Eric Chemi. Politely Pushy. I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Well, Cliff, welcome to the show. I appreciate your time today. I know we've talked before a little bit, but it's fun to get you here in this setting and just chat about what you're doing now and how you got there, especially because I didn't realize you had been at Businessweek, and I think we might have overlapped. We just missed each other because remind me, you left in what year?
2013, I think it was.
2013. So I would have been there because I was at Bloomberg. I was at Bloomberg from 2010, the beginning of 10 to the end of 14. So when I was doing work for Businessweek in those last few years. So we would have both been there at the same time. But
yeah, which office were you in?
731 Lexington.
Okay, yeah.
So I was right there at the main headquarters. But you must have been out west the whole time, right?
Yeah, in San Francisco, and I think toward the latter part of that, I wasn't traveling as much to the East Coast. Like, I think once Bloomberg took over, they didn't have us traveling as much. I think I traveled a bit for the Bloomberg television. So I'd fly in and out to do segments for them. But yeah, not nearly as much as Businessweek. Businessweek had a much better budget for that, which is fun.
Yeah. I'm curious about that move, going from there to Netflix, because I saw there were a lot of stories about it at the time. It's kind of a big deal. I saw one from Chris Roush at Talking Biz News. Cliff Everett, who used to cover Netflix, now going to be working there. That little subtle dig, right? Like, oh, he was covering him, now he's working there. Like, tell me about that move, why you did it. Because in a way, that was your permanent shift. You sort of stayed in communications ever since then. So why then? Why them? And what was the thought process?
Yeah, I think when you think about the world of journalism, to me, the world had been changing quite a bit from when I started out as a cub reporter to working as an editor and a writer and covering various industries, particularly tech. I think my focus was on business, I think fairly early, and then tech in particular. And I like the idea of intersections and changing things where something was going to be sort of world changing. So during my time at Businessweek, I basically covered what I affectionately called the gizmos and gadgets beat. And that was all the new stuff that was coming out, these newfangled gadgets and newfangled things, starting with the BlackBerry, which folks would call the Blueberry if it was colored blue instead of just calling it black.
I remember one guy mentioned calling it a Blueberry, and he's like, oh yeah, this is the new BlackBerry. It's a Blueberry. I remember him saying that. And then nowhere could I find anyone else ever having written that or described it. I'm like, I'm looking for this Blueberry, and this guy said it was a Blueberry. I don't know.
A BlackBerry. It's just blue colored.
Yeah.
That was BlackBerry trying to be more entertaining. In any case, so I started covering the world of streaming when Bloomberg bought Businessweek. I was sort of doing a hybrid role, doing both the magazine and Bloomberg, and they had switched my beat or added to my beat sort of the whole entertainment side. And for some reason, Netflix fell under entertainment and this weird sort of technology thing. And so I started covering them and realized they were doing something that was going to be world changing, I think, in a lot of ways, change how we basically view content. YouTube was sort of this funny little thing at the time, but Netflix was really trying to advance the idea of long form content and being able to do it seamlessly and whatnot. And their head of communications was moving over to Europe. Netflix at the time had 3 countries, North America, so Canada, Mexico, and the US. And he was moving over to sort of help launch Europe. So they wanted somebody who was pretty familiar to come in and reached out to me. And I said no at first, because I was like, I'm a journalist. I've been doing this for a long time. I like being a journalist. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought about how the world of journalism was changing and how, in particular, it was becoming sort of more turn of the screw stuff. I like sort of learning things. And I felt like I was not learning anything anymore. I was just sort of like trying to break news. And and after a certain while, you sort of tire of what's the next color of the iPhone is going to be, or how many camera lenses it's going to have, or whatever, that type of stuff. And I was pretty well steeped in it. I felt like I was a pretty well-known technology journalist, and was followed by quite a lot of folks. But the things I really enjoyed doing were the big cover stories that were looking at, is this company going to succeed in what it's doing? And the thing that was interesting, I always said I'd go and talk to PR agencies and said, if you really are pitching a Businessweek story, there's only two stories that Businessweek wrote at the time. It was like, you're the best thing since sliced bread or your toast. Those were the two stories you wrote. And it was just the way you wrote them that was the entertaining part about it. And Netflix at the time, I don't know if people even remember this, but they had started out as a DVD business, DVD by mail. And they, when I covered them, they split and said, we're dropping this whole DVD by mail thing. Streaming is the future. And everybody thought this company's going to die.
I remember just thinking, this is not going to make any sense. I don't understand. Like the DVDs, I get that. Or you can pick one DVD or 3 DVDs or whatever it was. And when you're done, you send it back. It's like there's no late fee. Whatever you're done, you send it back. If you want to sit for 3 months, that's great. And I remember around 2010, thinking about like, oh, they're going to start doing the streaming thing. And I thought, no, like the internet's not quick enough for that. That's not going to work. It's going to just
it was this interesting little sort of, everybody thought it was a side thing, a side gig. Oh, they're going to do the streaming thing as a side thing. And then when they decided to split it off, people were like, how are they going to charge for this? Like we're paying for the DVD thing. And the thing that I realized was the convenience of online. At Intel exec once told me, and I thought this was, and I still remember this, it was the simplest sentence when I was talking to him. He said, the internet won. I was like, what does that mean? But I got it right away because I had been covering the industry. Like I look back and think about Apple and when Apple was rising, and they had this software called Rip Mix Burn. You could burn your CDs onto your Mac, and then your music CDs, and then put them on some other third-party music player. And I remember they came out with the iPod. That took off right away. People were like, "This is the coolest thing." But they had been fighting with the music industry for a long time because the music industry was saying, "Hey, this is pirated stuff." And they turned around and struck deals with the recording industry, and Rip Mix Burn went away, and they started charging you for the same thing that you could do for free, and people applauded it. Nobody turned around and said, Apple's going to go out of business because they are now making it harder or more expensive for the consumer to do something. And that really stuck with me with Netflix, because the simplicity of it is that you get this loads of content, and you pay one price for it. And at the time, the price was relatively cheap compared to cable in particular, right? And it's still relatively cheap if you're just buying Netflix versus 7 streaming services. So that's what stuck with me, was that this is a company that's going to go places because they are first to do this. It's a market in a lot of ways that is defensible and indefensible. A lot of folks can get into it, but it's super expensive to acquire the content. And they perfected the technology behind it first. And that's what struck me. And that's the reason why I sort of, as I say, went to the dark side. I initially said no, and then I thought about it some more and thought, hey, I'm really enjoying what I do less as a journalist, and really am interested in learning more about a particular company. As a journalist, I knew 20% of what a company does. And then when I went to Netflix, I knew about 80%. Netflix.
Isn't that the fascinating thing? I feel like as journalists, we're always on the outside, right? You learn what they want you to learn, or what you might be able to like sneak a little secret or gossip or a tip. But when you get in there, you realize, oh, I had no idea what was going on here.
You're like, wow, they're doing this and they're doing that. And I was shocked because Reed Hastings, the CEO at the time, would all his directors and above, he would have a monthly one-on-one with you. I don't know how he did it. 1,000 people.
It'd be like your whole month right there. You have no time for anything else.
the first, I think it was the second week I started, I had my one-on-one with him, and it's a long story, but I was wearing like, these really uncomfortable shoes, and he's like, "Hey, let's take a walk." And we went walking by the creek, and I was like, "God, these shoes killing me, and it's 100 degrees out here." But he was telling me the whole 5-year plan. I mean, a 5-year plan for a company, this new employee who's, I was a director, but it still was shocking to me.
Where was director in that status?
Director, then vice president and senior vice president, and then Reed, so, it was it's fairly flat. But even below director, a lot of people, senior managers and stuff, they would share at the time a lot of information. You get all of this broad sort of, quarterly plan and half-year plan. And I was shocked that none of this leaked out, because I covered Netflix really.
Right, here you are, a former reporter, and they're just telling you everything.
Right. We're going to be charging this much in 5 years, and we're going to be doing this. And I'm like, what? You're telling me this? Like, oh, I wish I had. This would be great stuff to be reporting.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that, I was there for, I think, less than 2 years, and they still followed that 5-year plan. It wasn't like it changed anything.
What was that like, though, to be there a short period of time? So when you came, did you think, I'm going to be here for a long time? Is it just something to do differently? Did you leave because you wanted to? I hear Netflix can get a little aggressive and crazy with how people come and go. What was that story?
The average tenure at Netflix is like 2 years, except for really senior people. And even some senior people move fast. Like, the company at the time was changing a lot. And I came aboard because I was really interested in the hyper growth story. It seems to be like where my interest is in companies, is when they're sort of at this turning point and about to do something different. And the idea for me is to help with the storytelling. Like I at the heart, as a journalist, you're a storyteller. And so I came aboard, and they wanted me, because I had broad experience in APAC, having been a technology reporter covering consumer electronics and gaming and all that stuff, to really sort of lead that effort about telling the Netflix story in places that were very, very skeptical of streaming. And I helped set up the whole going global thing at CES 2015, I think it was, and then left shortly after that. And part of it was that there was a movement to change the whole communication structure and have people move to different regions, and I didn't want to do that. And I also had opportunity at a startup where I was like, hey, now that I'm doing this, I haven't done a startup, but I think it'd be interesting to go to a startup and see what that's like. And so I went to 2 startups after Netflix, and it's a different beast altogether too. I mean, it's really interesting having. I look at my career, and I find it interesting because I feel like I've gone across many different disciplines and many different sort of business eras for companies, where the first startup, it was like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We're losing money, we got to lay off a bunch of people, and then we're going to hire a bunch of salespeople, then we're going to lose people, and so it was quite interesting.
What I find fascinating is the media makes it seem like, oh, look at all these people that are billionaires, all these startups, they're all making all this money. But then you go through the reality of how many of these startups are out there, and most people don't make any money, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of them fail.
Money, the stock goes to zero, the people all go bankrupt, the VC lost all their money. But we see like, oh, well, geez, here's Alexander Wang without an E in his name, and he's a billionaire. And then the girl that worked there for like a year, and she's a billionaire. Here's all these billionaires that I'd never even heard of.
Right.
And it seems like it's so easy, but it's not,
No, it's not. And a lot of it is, just in my opinion, it's an interesting, having been to startups and having been at 2 companies now that were founder led. Reed Hastings at Netflix, and then Jensen Huang at NVIDIA. It's about the founder and them sort of not getting in their own way, I find. A lot of times the smartest guys, the ones who, in my opinion, succeed, are the ones who realize the things that they can't do and that they need to hire people to do those things. And what I found at least the startups that I've been at, is that the founders feel like they can do everything.
Can you tell that difference? Were you able to figure out, like, or do you see it now, like in the sense of, oh, this founder's going to make it, this founder's not? It's almost like now you could be a VC based on your inside
Yeah,
experience.
you can look and say, like, like what are your strengths and where do you think you fit? Like especially product-led companies. I've been at a lot of product-led companies. The product guy, these guys who founded the company know the product, and that's where their strength is. And so in a lot of ways, that's like a CTO position or COO position or whatever, And so a lot of companies where they get out of the way is if you're a product person, yeah, try to hire somebody who can run a company, And if you're the visionary person, then you stay in that role as a visionary and you help guide the communication and direction of the company.
What would you say Jensen is and Reed is?
They both are visionaries. They both are really good. Like Reed always said, he learned to get out of his own way very quickly. And he had lots of great anecdotes that he would tell you and stuff like that about how he'd be working hard. And the CEO of some company came in and gave him great advice on stuff. And the same with Jensen. Jensen, I always thought is really, really good at seeing the big picture. He can process information and help simplify it. He's like a journalist on steroids, right? Like, as a technology journalist in particular, your job is almost like to be a translator because nobody really cares about the technology. They care about what the technology does for them. And so he's really good at coming in and saying, hey, product guys, you're thinking about the wrong thing. Think about this, or this is what we're going to name something, or this is how we're going to describe something. On our communications team, I'd be shocked because we'd be like all sitting there like, how are we going to describe this? And it's like lots of people who have lots of experience in communications, and he'd come in and say something super simple, and he'd be like, God, why didn't I think of that?
Why is this the guy who still is smarter than everyone else, and no one here can figure this out? He has to come in and tell us what we're doing wrong.
Yeah. The trap with that sometimes is everybody waits for that CEO to come in and fix stuff for you, right?
Right.
And so then they're sort of overworked. But the fun part of it is that they're really good and they're most of the time right.
What I don't understand is, like you said, they wait for the CEO to come fix them. I think about more of these consumer brands. I know that's not your area, but when I think about, Brian Nickel here from Taco Bell, whatever, to Chipotle to Starbucks, and it's like, he's going to fix this and this and this. But I'm like, you and I can walk into a Starbucks and say, well, I'd fix these 10 things too. And you got thousands of people working there. Why did you need to hire this one guy to fix everything? We all know what the problems are. Why can't you fix it? Like that to me is where I get stuck on. Why does the CEO have to be the one guy that fixes obvious things?
Right. A lot of times companies, especially companies that feel like they're in trouble or they're in trouble with investors or whatever, they will look for the reputation person, came in and turned something around, and the ideas, like you said, sometimes aren't particularly new or interesting, right? They could be the same ideas that the other guy had, but they're said a different way. And you get the benefit of the doubt from the investor community because, he fixed this company and he fixed that company. So sure, he's going to fix this company.
What do you think about the role of communications when you especially think about Netflix and NVIDIA? Like they're two of the biggest, companies. I think are they both Mag 7 companies? Are both part of that FANG Mag 7? Yeah.
Not in the trillions. Yeah.
But they're in that group.
Yeah,
obviously NVIDIA for sure. NVIDIA for sure. But when you look at the two founders, obviously Reed's just leaving now, but what is it about their interest in communications and how they want to do it and your role there and how do they perceive the media and how they want to use the media to get their goals accomplished? Obviously, we know Bill Gates was a big proponent of spending money on PR. We know what Steve Jobs did. We don't hear as much about Hastings and Jensen in terms of what they want to do there. But what was your inside perspective on their thought process around communications?
I think it's a holistic approach, really. And the thing that was interesting with both of them is, and I think this is true of it's becoming truer of many companies now, understanding the importance of storytelling. You see now all of these storytelling content lead roles and stuff like that. The world of communications is shrinking in a lot of ways, but you're seeing lots of postings for that. And the idea essentially is that you have to be able to tell a story in a way that's not going to get your company in trouble, right? Like Netflix was great. Reed always said, like he had a great saying, like, look, we're not going to kill anybody with our content, so we don't really have to worry about that too much. There's very little crisis that you might have with Netflix other than it going down.
But they have crises with like, oh, the pricing or whatever Dave Chappelle said, or what content are you going to have or not have. I feel like that's where they would run into.
Yeah, but in terms of like, is that a crisis? It's a news cycle, but is it a crisis, right? Like and they have the thing that was interesting about Netflix is numbers are behind everything, right? They can tell like Dave Chappelle's going to go there, and a certain number of people are going to be like, I'm fed up and cancel, and a certain number of people are going to be like, oh, that sounds really interesting and sign up. So they have the numbers backing basically everything they do, and so it's less of a crisis. The more crisis is if they're down for like 3 hours. You're going to get more people pissed off about that than Dave Chappelle. Press like to focus on it because, I was a member of the press. You were a member of the press. You like tension. Like if a company is just great, then there's no story to tell, right?
I need conflict. I need drama. I need debates.
Right.
I need fights. I need all this stuff. Yeah.
And so you got to have that, and press will focus on that immediately. So, you talk about the administration now, and they talk about how press blows up stuff, and there's a lot of stuff to blow up in this administration. But it's also true that the tension is always there, and you want to be able to report on the tension because that is the stuff that people are interested in. Like, why do you think soap operas are still around, and reality shows is because it's tension.
When you were at the smaller firms, at the startups, how does that contrast? Because, we deal with a lot of companies that are like, oh, we don't know if PR matters, or we don't need PR. We're going to win on our product. And you see a lot of these companies, oh, no, PR is a waste of money and da-da-da. It's like, okay, if that's true, then why are very smart people like Zuckerberg and Reed and Jensen and Bill Gates and all these people, why are the richest people in the world spending a lot of money on comms and PR? I mean, people will point, oh, well, Elon Musk's not doing that. I'm like, well, he is the PR agent in that case.
Yeah,
right?
He's the personality. He's the company.
So, but there's a lot of startups we know where they're just like, no, just comms and PR is a waste of money and time. I'm just going to focus on product. Yeah.
Well, now there's a whole different story behind that, right? Like when I was at startups, the problem you had is that it's hard to break through, right? It's like you're a startup and you're one of many covering that does X, right? There's like 5 startups doing any particular one thing at a time. And so trying to break through is hard. And so your focus is on like, oh, we got funding for something, or we have this product, and you're really trying to develop a developer audience. So people were like, I'm not really thinking about like the whole strategic communication story yet. I think that's changing now in a lot of ways, particularly because of AI. Like AI is the reason why you're seeing all these storytelling roles from startups all the way up the chain to Amazon and Google and all this stuff, is because the world of AI has changed the way you can disseminate information on a company. Like the old rules of SEO are out the door. Like you can't just pay for ad clicks, which is what a lot of startups would do, right? It's like, I need to just be at the top of the SEO chain. So they'd hire an SEO expert and say, that's where my money's going.
Yeah, that's over.
Now you have to think about, with AI, it's looking for content. It's specifically looking for content.
It needs a lot of words. It needs a lot of words. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now the whole storytelling and communications aspect is crucial to surviving, for anybody.
Did you ever feel like, oh, geez, I should have just stayed in media? Have you enjoyed this last kind of decade here on the comm side?
Yeah, look, every job you're frustrated with when you're in the job, right? I don't think I've ever been in any job where I'm like, oh, it's all happy days, and I think sometimes, having been a journalist, it's really fun learning a lot of new little things. And that's what I really loved as a technology journalist is like, I could, spout off on this, that, or this software, or this, new gaming platform or anything, and that was the fun part for me, where it was like, I wasn't in this little funnel. It's also as fun, especially when you're companies that are doing well. I've been fortunate enough that the companies I've been with the longest amount of time have done well for themselves. And so that's fun because you're winning, but you
And
also see.
are you getting some of that trickle down? Because I've heard a lot of stories of people where like, oh, the company does well, but I mistimed how I dealt with my options and stock and blah blah blah. So the company did well, but I did not do well.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, you do fairly well with the stock options you're granted, especially at big companies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you're there for a certain amount, you got to be there at least a year usually for
I'm
first.
assuming 5 years at NVIDIA is post COVID's been okay for you, you know?
Yeah, you did pretty well. When I
Yeah.
started, the shares were $90 a share, it was $90 a share pre-split, and I think we split
Yeah.
at $800 or something. So yeah, you do pretty well, with those companies. The trade-offs is that nowadays you work a lot harder than you did even 5 years ago. Like, the pace has picked up in a lot of ways. So your quality of life sometimes is not as good as it was way back when.
How would you rank quality of life? Like, because obviously Netflix, they grind you, NVIDIA, they grind you, startups, they grind you. So like, what was the easiest job? What was the hardest job in terms of like, I can breathe here, I can have a life?
I think the startups ones were easier in that vein because you didn't have to worry so much about. I mean, you were trying to figure out content strategy and marketing together, and you didn't have to worry about, oh, I also have to be courting press and there's 5 different roles you take in communications at a lot of big companies, and what's the competition doing, how do I react to that. At big companies you have to think about all of that, and so it's a full-time job. My average week at a large company is at least 60 hours, if not more. And at a startup, like at the end of the day, your day is ended, and you come back in and you start over again. It was less stress at a startup, but then the stress is that you're getting paid less than you would at a bigger company. You're getting shares that may go away. It's not like they're guaranteed because you don't, until the place goes public, then they're useless to you, right? They're just, yeah.
Right. There's no one's worried that NVIDIA shares or Netflix shares are going to zero.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and you see down days, and everybody looks at their shares and says, "Oh, well, it's great. We're up." I look today. I'm like, "Oh, we're up $3. That's great. My shares are still there. They're good." Yeah. So you're happy.
What do you see as next for you? What are you trying to work on now? Like you said there, it's like, okay, it's cool to go to the other side. Then you want to do a startup. Now you've done the biggest, most famous companies in the world. You've done a bunch of startups. What's itching in you? Like, I want to learn something new now.
Yeah, I'm still interested in AI. I mean, like I was thinking, like through if I connect all the sort of the comms jobs I had since leaving as a journalist, they were either machine learning or AI focused, in a lot of ways. So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, I'm really obviously still interested in that because it's going to be world changing. It's already starting to change the world, but we're in early days of this. So what I look for is like, what is sort of the next thing? What are the problems that essentially are going to arise that some company is trying to address in a lot of ways? And those are the companies that are really, really interested in me. I've started doing some consulting work for a couple companies because those are sort of the fascinating things. It's like they may win, they may not win, but it's really interesting. Like, NVIDIA, when I started at NVIDIA, and people were like, NVIDIA, and like they make gaming chips. Like, even though I was starting on the enterprise side, no one knew who NVIDIA was until
Right. Which is crazy now to think about. That. It wasn't long ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Now people stop me at the gym. You were at NVIDIA. You're at NVIDIA. And I'm like, how do you even know that? Like I see you in passing at the gym. And so
that's so funny.
Yeah. I mean,
gym. Let's talk about NVIDIA at the gym. That's funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's funny when companies are on the rise. They're like, they're superstars. I always, having covered technology for more than 20 years, I always find it interesting. Like one of the a Sony exec once told me when I was at Netflix, he was like, enjoy it now. Because remember when Sony was like oh my God, you're working at Sony, it's so cool, and they got this and they got that. And now Sony is like, it's there, but nobody thinks, this is some great company that
Yeah,
you want to go to.
no one, if no one's stopping you at the gym if you're working.
Right. And saying, oh, you work at Sony, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. Even Apple now, like you don't get a lot of people that are like, oh, it's great to be working at Apple.
It's a little bit older news at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody's looking for the next big thing, the next, what shares are going to be rising. Everybody wants to get rich, right? And so in a lot of ways, it's like, what shares are going to be rising the fastest? What tips can you give me? What are they doing? That type of stuff. But the interesting thing for me is not necessarily about making gazillions of dollars. In comms, you aren't going to. They're not going to give you giant blocks of stock. In comms, you get
it's still mostly going to be your base. It's mostly going to be your base.
Yeah, you get base and you get fair amount of shares. You're not getting like the vast majority of your compensation in stock.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is learning new things, and is this company doing things that ain't going to like destroy the world in a lot of ways? Like, NVIDIA, one could argue, is an arms supplier. So it may be supplying the things that are going to destroy the world, but it's an interesting company to me because it understood in a lot of ways, particularly with Jensen. I felt like he really modeled Apple a lot of ways. I don't know if he has ever said that or thinks about that, but he really understood that hardware and software together as a platform really, really is what helps a company grow. And the same thing when you think about Netflix, it was the same way. Netflix really dragged the consumer electronics industry kicking and screaming into the world of streaming. They did not want to do that, and he forced them to.
How would you compare the two styles of Jensen and Reed in terms of who did you like working for better, who was easier, who was nicer, who was tougher, who was smarter? What were the differences? It's not a lot of people. You're probably one of the few people in the world that worked for both of these guys.
It's funny. When I went to Netflix, I was shocked by how smart just about everybody was. Like I had technology writers, go in and we do technology issues and divide up stuff. And one of the guys went, and this was when Wi-Fi was first coming out. And he went to Starbucks with a Dell laptop, and I came back and said, "How'd it go?" And he's like, "I could not get on, to Wi-Fi at Starbucks." And I said, "Did you you have to pay for it?" At the time, Starbucks was charging you for Wi-Fi. And he's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And this is like technology writer, and you knew a lot of technology writers who didn't know a thing about technology. They were interested in the business side of the story, and so I came aboard at Netflix and everybody was super duper smart, and Reed was he's incredibly smart and incredibly, again, vision. He thinks through things. Like who has a 5-year plan? Most companies are like, especially when you're starting something new, you're like, I'm barely going to figure out the next 2 years. And 5 years are, like when you're like already saying that this is going to be the price of this.
5 years ago, there was no ChatGPT. Anyone who had a 5-year plan 5 years ago, it's been blown up.
It's crazy, So, but Reed, I felt like if you're comparing and contrasting the two, I felt like he was just so low key. I don't think I ever heard him raise his voice to anybody. He just felt like, what comes to mind is like the hippy dippy guy, the guy who's just like so laid back and so cool. And, and Jensen is much more driven. Jensen is like, he'll be direct with you. Like, I'm going to really hammer you on this now. You'll be in a meeting and everybody's like, because, he goes after somebody and it's because he wants you to be prepared when you come into those meetings. In a lot of ways, his learning process is in these meetings, and somebody will come in and they'll be describing something and he's like, wrong. Like, how do you not know this? Like I was talking to this person and, and a funny thing about good executives and not just CEOs is how well they triangulate, right? How they can take this amount of input from somebody else and this here and then put it all together in something that makes sense. Like journalists do it on a much smaller level than the guys who are really thinking through the whole big picture thing. And so that is the thing that I think is that I found is like the really good CEOs do that really well because they are hearing a lot. It's just chatter to them, right. And how do you focus that into something useful? and then come and then churn out like, here's the answer. It's like, ENIAC 1, right? They're getting lots of input, and then suddenly it's like, here's the answer.
This is great, Cliff. I appreciate it. It's like all of a sudden, like I blink. It's like we've been here almost 40 minutes here. I could spend all day. This is great. It's so nice to check back in with you, see what you're working on, think about what's coming up next for you, and just gonna hear some of those stories. And look forward to talking to you more.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks. Good chatting with you.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.